if there are any questions, I will be happy to take those questions.
Great. Yeah, we have things beginning to pop into the Q&A and into the chat as well. Thank you so much, Farzin. This is fascinating. And I'll start with a question myself while the other questions are coming in. This software you're talking about that's almost ready, where you could feed a script into it and it will give you a movie. Presumably that won't fit on a laptop. Presumably that requires a lot more computing power and a lot more storage. So we're talking about a whole new generation of computers that are going to be needed as well, so the hardware can handle the software.
Let me comment on it, if I may. So we know our laptops from the time that they used to be desktop. It had a hard disk. It had some power supply that would you connect to electricity. And then the power supply was replaced and the battery was put in and it became laptop, right? There are many versions of these machines that have no hard drive on them.
Yeah.
There are also versions of these that have very little processing power on them. What they do is that they connect wirelessly through a wireless network that will connect to a data center. So your iPhone or your laptop is just the interface for a human to consume. The real computational node and the power that you're speaking of is in the form of a data center.
The cloud.
The cloud, exactly. So a number of companies have the cloud. They offer, there are public clouds, there are private clouds, there are all kinds of things. Yes, it does require a massive amount, but remember that the computational powers available to humanity has doubled roughly every 18 months.
Yeah.
And has remained so for the last 50, 60 years. So that was the Moore's law. And then the Moore's law continues, but this is no longer at the same price or the same amount of power. So the challenges for the data center is to make sure that the cost remains within limit. And also there are now data centers that have zero carbon footprint.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the ones that will contribute to sustainability.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
They must have to have huge solar panels and such because they use a lot of power and
That's
generate a lot of heat.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That is...
Very good. Well, let me turn to our Q&A, which is now ballooned to 16 questions. So Christina says, the lack of guardrails is my biggest concern. I'm a higher education instructor, and I don't feel I can trust my students to not use generative AI to do their coursework and pass it off as theirs. And I don't trust Turnitin.com to catch when programs like ChatGPT are used to create their work. So I feel lost at how to handle this. Any insights?
What you pointed out is absolutely true.
Yep.
Absolutely true. Right now, ChatGPT or equivalent of it and so forth are experimental. And they are just for, I think it ranked as the fastest adoption of any consumer product when it came on. How many millions of people adopted it within a few days, hours and days, and so forth. So right now, you're absolutely right that higher education has this challenge, this difficulty. I do not know of any immediate solution, but one can imagine that if regulation comes, that any generated system at the data center source, so you don't worry about your student. You go after the big companies and the silicon manufacturers and so forth that have the data centers and say, when you generate something in response to ChatGPT, watermark it that this is the AI generated content in such a way that the student cannot remove it. So now, how you can do that may be complicated and so forth. I understand, but maybe it calls for that if the previous model of education was controlled by the teacher and the student is presumed to be deceptive and cheater and tries to go, maybe the solution would be that before we start teaching them about English literature or about humanities or about math, that we teach them ethics when they are 5 years old and 6 years old and 7 years old, so that they understand that there is an inner guardrail in their own body. And many of us have those guardrails. Many of us professionals proud ourselves that I'm not a cheater, right? So if we can build this in students, that may be in fact the best. So challenges do come, and maybe the solutions also come about finding ways to, because really our education is mostly education for employable skills rather than life skills. I think life skills are equally, if not more important.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what I do, Christina. I require my students, when they write an essay, to quote me in my video or quote my PowerPoint. And ChatGPT doesn't have access to that. So, of course, they could always grab a ChatGPT thing and stick something in from mine. Sure. They could still do that, but it's a little more complicated. Debbie says, so it is already all over the world. I teach English online at a university not to be named. So far this semester, we have numerous essays written by AI. What is your recommendation how to deal with this? I guess we already answered that question.
Yes, I have nothing to add to that.
Yeah, David says, thank you. Will you share your slides? The answer to that, well, we will put the slides up on the Wilmette Institute's page for this particular webinar. And the recording, of course, will be available on that page as well. So you'll be able to click through to the recording or click through to the slides if we get those from Farzin. And I think that was the plan. Daniel says, how can we avoid AI being exploited by a few who have more influence, money, and authority?
That's a very good question. You know, part of the reason why Baha'is work so hard in the neighborhood to try to build communities from ground up is that the existing, let me refer to it as old world order, is lamentably defective. So you are absolutely right that a few will exploit. But then if governments join hands and put the guardrails legally in place with teeth to enforce it, then it is possible for others also to make some contribution. So think about cell phone. So cell phone is such a wonderful invention. And obviously a few companies disproportionately benefit from that invention, right? But also many other people are able to use this device to enhance whatever is the reality of their own environment. I mean, taxation, regulation. Remember, we said individual, community, and institutions. They should work hand in hand. So if you have an economy that is free for all and is all individuals and corporations, then the negative effect will be quite obvious. But if you are able to then, say, communities give birth to institutions of governance, and these institutions can protect the interests of the collective, while at the same time providing for innovation and freedom of the individual in a balanced way, then hopefully we can come up with a solution. But I agree with you that the solution is not small, is not piecemeal, is not individual. And actually, this is the kind of problem that you cannot solve in one country. You know, like climate change is a kind of problem that you have to, is a global problem, and you have to address it globally.
Stephen, Mary Lou asks for a link from one of the slides, but she can get that once we have the slides up on the website. Stephen asked this question: could you talk a bit about engaging in discourse in the high-tech area? How do you engage in discourse about these?
Sure. So discourse is a very wide word that can span many things. As an individual, whatever your profession is, in your own professional environment, you can make some application to it. I used to teach engineering at a university, and I'm not saying that this is the best way to do it, but that's the only example I can share with you now, is that at the departmental decision-making level, I suggested, this was many years ago, I was a young person at the time, I suggested that there is such a thing called consultation, and consultation has certain principles. And why don't we just, in the department, among the professors in the department and the head of department, why don't we just look at these things? For example, if I have an idea, I give my idea, but after I give my idea, I'm no longer attached to it. And so if after some discussion I become convinced that that was a silly idea, I'm okay to abandon it. So you see, simple things that we learn either by the study of the Baha'i principles or practices, for example, this consultation, because all Baha'i assemblies work on the principle of consultation. And the department decided to adopt it. Now imagine, instead of the chairman of the department, the head of the department dictating things and making people dissatisfied and so on, he had some elements. I'm not saying it was perfect, but it was some elements of it. So that's what we mean by discourse impacting. In technology, I know of many technology companies that pride themselves that they are in fact, Silicon Valley is full of startups whose motto is that, whose mantra is that we want to make the world a better place.
Yeah.
Okay. So therefore, that gives you an opening to bring about ethics into your discussions in technology. But it is something that every one of you, every one of us, will have to find out in our own environment and decide what is best. Learning these things and saying it in a way that comes across as open-minded, then more people are likely to accept.
Faraz says, please share some principles relating to the necessary guardrails to avoid exacerbating existing inequities in the world. And can you give a practical example?
Sure. So we know that some technologies related to AI, already we have experience that we know that they are harmful. So maybe the guardrail would be, let's say, injustice. I gave the example of prison systems, right? So we know where not to use. So use that knowledge in a very rapid cycle. I'm saying Baha'i community works in 3-month cycles, okay? In rapid cycles to learn and see what might work well according to principles and might not work well. So the principles of honesty, of loyalty, of privacy, of security, you're all familiar with all these principles. But then, as you said, to trying to use practical ways in which we can say what might work or might not work. I can give you 1 or 2 examples from my own experience. I can give you, let me give you one example. My own graduate studies for the doctoral degree, which was many moons ago, was to show mammographic images to the computer with the same layers of the neural networks, to classify it as a pattern of microcalcifications on a mammogram as either benign or malignant. We could say this is a very good use of AI because you are helping this reduce unnecessary biopsies, for example, right? But we always insisted, even at that time, that the radiologist should be in the loop. This should be regarded as a tool in the hand of a radiologist who ultimately has the legal responsibility of declaring that you may or may not have a cancer. So this would be an example of using AI with the guardrail attached to the AI.
Layla says, absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much. How do you see AI as a force that will eliminate jobs? And what do you think is the best training for someone to get in this sector to help humanity?
Very good. One good news about the training is that there are a number of free or near free, for example, Coursera, where you can Google this and find out. very good courses at the level of undergraduate or postgraduate that you can take for free and study. So that's in terms of education about it. The field, because there are truly thousands of universities and companies that that put money behind this, and so the research is moving very rapidly, like month after month, things change. So you need to catch up with this. Sorry, what was there a second part to the question other than learning?
Eliminating jobs. AI as a force
jobs.
eliminating jobs.
All right. Okay. So jobs always change, and then new jobs are born. So humanity had a different set of jobs when there was no electricity, and now we have a different set of jobs that today. So if you are a young person just finishing your degree, you should realize that, particularly in advanced technology, that whatever you learn at the university today has a half-life, probably about 3 years, and then it is no longer valid, right? But what you learn is communicating well, reasoning well, working with other people, solving problems, cooperation, a love for learning and cooperation. And in fact, companies that do not compete usually are more successful, because the traditional theory in economics is that companies must compete. The company I work for actually openly says we never ever compete. If anybody else comes into our business area, we abandon it. We leave it to them, because we have smart people who can solve unsolved problems in an area that nobody else has tried. So those are the idea. Sometimes it's referred to as the red ocean, blue ocean idea.
How can we, what Cheryl asks us, how can we influence AI or ChatGPT to, quote, learn ethics? Should we ask ChatGPT to look up the Baha'i writings and references so it's exposed to more positive information?
I'm afraid ChatGPT already knows all the Baha'i writings. That means in the way the underlying model was trained, but by using the common crawl, it really scraped the entire internet and took all the text that was available on the internet and learned from that. That's why you can ask ChatGPT, write me an essay in the language of William Shakespeare.
Yeah.
And he knows that because it has done. So yes, I think if this there was an early version of these assistants, what they call personal assistant, AI, that very quickly learned very bad language, and the company had to quickly shut that down, because it learns from existing corpus of human discourse. So you go to all kind of websites, social media, and so forth, and you scrape that. If that is full of misinformation, it will learn misinformation. Yeah. That's why some people said you have to first ask ChatGPT to generate something, then you go check it against Google to see if it is true.
Hopefully Google's not using ChatGPT to get to the questions too.
Hopefully not.
Yeah, someone actually asked ChatGPT to generate hidden words like Baha'u'llah's hidden words, and it produced some very weird hidden words, which sounded vaguely right, but were just
that was weird. My point. That was my point about deception and appearance of coherence, appearance of plausibility. But so much of it can really fool us. So we have to be careful. Correct.
Danny says, what are some positive practical uses of AI in community building work within a neighborhood? Are you aware of any, such as using AI statistical systems to be more systematic with reading our reality, for example?
I have not seen it in any use. There may be some uses of it, but if your aspiration is that instead of going and making a home visit, instead of creating a real human chat at somebody's kitchen table, sipping coffee and talking about ethical principles and spiritual teachings of Baha'u'llah, there is no AI tool that can replace that. So one of the guardrails would be to make sure that AI remains where it belongs.
That's interesting. Let's see. Adib says, what forums exist today where ethical solutions for AI are explored? The last instance that I recall was Google's effort via Timnit Gebru's research. In essence, aside from government, are there arenas in private and public sector exploring the ethics of AI?
The answer is yes. Many companies have a number of their employees that are focused on that, because we know in the society there's a discussion about the ethics of AI. Companies that especially those that generate models. So if I may divulge this, in the company I work for, we have, working with our lawyers and working with our ethicists, we hire individuals that are ethicists to help us craft statements to say this model should be used in these cases and not used in these other cases. So trustworthy AI is a flag, a mark that is stamped on various models that come in computer vision or in speech processing and so on. So trustworthy AI, ethical AI is a thing. So if you are involved in that, make sure that whoever gives you a system or a model ask the right questions about ethical statements.
That's fascinating. Sarv says, hello, Farzin. You provided a parallel between cell phones that were once built in a centralized part or parts of the world. However, they spread throughout the world. The world did not participate in the development and application of the technology of cell phones. How can we anticipate that humanity will be participating collectively in the development in a more ethical AI worldwide?
Yes. So there are, so let me explain this. If I may name a company, let's say Intel, shall we take that, okay? So they manufacture silicon. They design and manufacture silicon, and then that silicon is embedded in some electronic system, right? Often, they use the latest CPU in order to design the next generation of CPU. And they may have access to some things that they have not commercialized. So they have this unfair advantage. That's why other companies, maybe even other countries, cannot, in this sense, compete, right? Why? Because so in AI is like that. A company that generates AI, one of its first uses is, can I use this AI to make the next chip? So is only, and because only they have it, this is also the same in universities. You know, a university in science department, you have certain skill, human skill,
right,
because you have that human skill. So if you are at the frontier of science, you can go. So what society needs to do is this. Society needs to say that abandoning people to the market forces is not an ethical thing to do. We like market forces in order to help people innovate and go forward, but there has to be some moderation. And so, for example, okay, maybe it's hard to make the chip that goes inside a cell phone, but many uses and applications exist in software development in multiple languages around the world, hundreds of languages around the world, that these big companies are not doing. And if that is the case, then we can create startup culture in many parts of the world that is generally referred to as the global south, that can take advantage. Maybe they cannot do the integrated circuit, but they can certainly do the software part. And so there are avenues that can. And if we had a world government, then we would see, in the Baha'i faith, we say, if a cluster reaches 1,000 core activities, their victory is our victory. We're not competing. Their victory is our victory. So the fact that some companies can make advanced AI, if they do not abuse this position, if they use it, somebody invented internet, right? And then this internet is now benefiting everybody. And so that's fine. So a combination of public-private joint venture or some kind of a global forum in which knowledge can move. You see, this question of the knowledge and who has it and who uses it and so on is intimately connected with the concept of power and how power is used in the world. So if we want justice in the world, we have to allow that knowledge can move in all kind of spheres. Yeah, I think it's right.
That's very good. Victor says, how do we ensure that our moral and spiritual development matches the pace of our rapid technological progress? I suppose the answer to that is good luck.
No, not good luck. Invest in it. We invest in material development, right? How much do we, our countries, our societies, how much do we invest in ethical education, in ethical discourse? So, really the people to be blamed for this are the religious leaders of the world who have used religion as a means of division, disunity, that their emphasis on their theological abstraction, whatever, it has been a cause of wars and of pulling people apart. When religious leaders of the world can unite, then it is possible to then invest. We have teachers for math and science. Why can't we have teachers that teach people all kinds of things regarding the subject of ethics itself? Should be a valuable subject to study. And by the way, in the Baha'i children classes and in the Junior Youth Spiritual Empowerment Program, we invest on spiritual and material education in parallel. So there is a book that talks about ethics, and there's also a book that talks about numbers. So 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, that in those neighborhoods where the Baha'is are active, and that's not all the neighborhoods of the world yet, but it is well spread throughout the world. It is spread in such a way that it is beyond, that nobody can uproot it. You know, in Iran and the persecution of the Baha'is of Iran, scholars are saying that the Baha'i faith cannot be decapitated because it has roots in the grassroots of the people. Right. So in those neighborhoods where this exists, we can see the new world civilization is being built one child at a time to learn about ethics and science together.
Excuse me. Whitney says, how do we get around the limitation you mentioned of the data input for AI to learn upon, given that there are so many aspects of our society which embed injustice and bias into the media, publishing, technology, etc.? What kind of guardrails can we put onto AI development to work against the reinstantiating of this old order?
Yes, very good point. So I do not know, but one suggestion would be that every research lab in every university that is developing AI, whose application is to the society, not just science, but to the society, right? So if you are using it for community building, if you're using it for education, if you're using it for health, if you're using for what, I don't know, maybe there's nothing that we can exclude, but every research group, other than scientists, specialists, should also have ethicists, so that they can still talk about that and say, what is the spiritual principle? How are we going to make sure that this model will be of benefit to humanity? And investing in that, hiring people, paying salaries to them who sit down and think through these things, and as part of the discourse. And the government should incentivize, just like we're incentivizing green energy, we can incentivize ethical AI.
That's interesting. By the way, we still have 23 questions. We've gone through about 19. And I think we can keep on going, considering that while the audience has shrunk, we still have a lot of interesting questions here. And I think we still have 163 people listening. So I think we might as well continue. Dennis says, your presentation looks like a syllabus for a college course. Is there such a course available?
I am not aware, but I will be happy to collaborate Some time ago, I used to be an adjunct professor at the California State University, and I offered a course with the title Professional Development, and its subjects was lifelong learning, collaboration. And the reason why university wanted this course was because the accreditation bodies had said that your students are very good in math and science, but they're not very good in these soft skills. And so I offered a course on soft skills. This was a pro bono work that I did for them. And so I have some experience in teaching a course. That course lasted 3 years, and then I moved, and so it came to an end. But if there are anybody in the audience who is interested to teach, I will collaborate with you. I will hand you not only the note of the course, the questions, the projects, the whole shebang. It was a proper university course that was based on similar ideas that what we are talking about. So I will be delighted to collaborate with anybody who's interested. I just don't have the time myself. I just don't have the time myself from my work to be able to teach it. Yeah.
Of course. An anonymous attendee says, is there any guidance on the use of AI?
There is no guidance that I know of. It would be in the writings of the Universal House of Justice. It may exist because, you know, the House of Justice writes to individuals who ask questions. There's no guidance in the writings of the central figures of the Baha'i faith because there was no AI at that time, obviously. But whether the House of Justice has made some statements about it, I'm not aware. What I am aware of is the Institute for the Studies for Global Prosperity. Those young people, mostly young Baha'is, university students who participate in the courses of ISGP, while it's not directly related to AI, at least the time that I was involved with it, but it strongly talks about harmony of science and religion. And so by extension, you could say, will provide principles to regulate AI.
This is an interesting question. Farzin says, will AI be able to genuinely help us conceive of an ethical framework for its own functioning?
Sure. So where does the framework that I spoke of can evolve, right? So you can apply the framework to any to community building in a neighborhood. You can apply it for various kinds of endeavors and so forth. So those who are developing AI or applying AI to some need in the society can certainly begin to think in terms of what is the framework within which I work. And just thinking about a framework and making sure the ethics are in place distinguishes you from people who are feverishly trying to make money by making the next gizmo using AI, you know. So injecting this, that as a scientist or as an applied scientist, an engineer, you should think about the end-to-end system, which includes its impact on society, its impact on inequality in the society and such. So the answer is yes, a framework can be articulated.
Sarv has commented additionally here. He says, much of my work relies on me shooting video, creating content, editing, producing, and the like. When you said AI is here and we have to learn how to use it, my pushback is I don't want AI to disrupt the creative process I employ. What is your thought about this?
Sure. So you should, just because email came, papers didn't disappear. So my guess is that AI will expand and will apply and will disrupt many existing jobs and so forth, but it will also provide opportunities. And at the end, you know, there still exist horses and buggies, even though the numbers are much smaller, of course, right? So the old and the new will survive together. The creative juices, if I may say, of humanity should be allowed free to function. Use AI as an additional tool rather than as a delegation that, okay, you go make the movie or you go write the story. Actually, I'm not sure if it will make very good original stories. So the original, you see, the prompt engineering part, that part is the human part. That means you decide what you want to do. This thing will help you do it faster and better.
Aaron has a long comment here, which is kind of interesting. Thank you for your presentation. How can we create a complementary relationship between humanity and machines? By complementarity, I mean that people remain indispensable for value creation and retain bargaining power in labor markets and in political decision-making. Companies who have access to machines with capabilities that replicate those of humans for a given task can and often replace humans in those tasks, creating the risk of concentrating wealth and power. How can we strike a balance between automation and augmentation in AI-powered systems to create prosperity for many, not just a few?
That's right. So that is the goal. Once we know the goal and we know the elements of our framework, then a discussion of this kind, you see. So again, I'll go back. If governments do nothing in the wild west, the individuals will run amok. So your question is how. The solution is that we should influence our communities, our societies, and our governments to create such regulation as to try to minimize. So, for example, in the older times, we used to say progressive taxation. There are some societies, the Nordic countries, for example, right, that you implement progressive taxation as a means to make, of course, their communities are small, 10 million people, 15 million people, they're like that, right? But they have successfully shown that governments can bring up the level of education, create a set of ethics in the society, that it does not exacerbate and those societies that don't and just abandon people to the forces of the market, naturally it will diverge. Inequality will increase.
Yeah.
I thought I read a book called Inequality for All. So
we're already there.
You're already there. You're already there for that. Right.
But I'll give a follow-up question to this. Can you envision, let's say in 2075, a dystopia where 30% of the population of the United States is unemployed because the jobs they had been doing no longer exist, because training was never provided to them, because a welfare-like living wage is provided to people who are unemployable, so they can live without working, and 2/3 of them have drug problems or alcohol problems because of their despair.
Right. So sometimes we imagine that the world remains static and only one element of it will advance. This is not the case. Everything will change. So 2 centuries ago, a large number, I don't know, 90%, 70%, I do not know exact number, of people lived on the farm and produced the food.
Right.
And then farms were mechanized, and now less than 5% need to do that. And even those 5% still have cars and phones, and so they're not impoverished villagers like in some parts of the world. Did the rest of the people become unemployed because the farms become mechanized? They became unemployed from working on the farm, but then they could go and publish books, or they could go and make music. So this idea of if productivity of let's take the example of manufacturing. If we can increase the manufacturing productivity so that fewer and fewer people work in manufacturing, and robots do most of the manufacturing work. The design element is separate. The humans can do the design part.
Mm-hmm.
The actual manufacturing of that design article is done by robotic factories. May very well be like that. If Amazon has delivery robots that are self-driving and is successful and doesn't have false ramification, maybe all those, you see, still wealth is generated. If that wealth is distributed equitably, then all those current employees of Amazon that are lifting up boxes and putting them on trucks and so forth, they can spend their time learning something.
Yeah, maybe from AI professors that don't cost as much money too.
Sure. So I think the point is this, that to bring about love, unity, justice in the society requires us to anchor ourselves in those fundamental principles. And once we are anchored, we are smart enough to find the ways of how to do that. So if we see evil in the world, it's because we have unmoored ourselves from our spiritual reality.
I want to sort of skip through some of these questions because we probably need to stop in a few minutes. We're coming up on, we're at 84 minutes after we got started. So we probably need to start about minute 90 or so. Doug has an interesting question. What do you think about training students to use AI as a tool, helping them to learn when it's useful and when not, emphasizing the importance of honesty and transparency in its use, as opposed to trying to eliminate its use by students? I think you've already partly addressed that.
Yes, we know AI will come. We can't shut it out. We can delay it by 3 years through some labor contract, but it's coming. So we might as well know how to use it properly. So introducing it at an early. I remember there was a time where students were forbidden, maybe they still are, from carrying a calculator to school with them. So no, you embrace it, use it, and then adjust your curriculum in order to achieve the desired result.
Roberto says, do you envision large language models being modeled with the principles of ethics of the faith, sort of artificial intelligence working to teach the faith? I'm not sure if that's two questions or one, but
yes, I do not know about teaching it, but large language models, because they are trained on the entire corpus of digital text, they are already aware of that. So actually, in many ways, if people of goodwill, Baha'is included, if people of goodwill create websites and put lots of content on it, or go onto social media and just flood the thing with the sentences or ideas and constructs that are for the betterment of the world, AI will get better, because and particularly if then the regulation of the government really forces social media companies to exclude disinformation, then the AI also will not pick up this information. You can think of it as an AI as some virtual child of humanity that has to be trained in this society. So clean up the society and AI will be good.
Interesting. David says, can AI be used to help us with the climate crisis?
Yes, definitely. The climate crisis can be solved in numerous ways, technical and otherwise, and AI can certainly assist with that. Not only generative AI, even the deep learning part, the analytical AI. We can think of AI as 3 ways, right? I think I mentioned it: conversational, analytical, or generative. So the analytical AI can be used for pattern recognition, for classification, for all kind of so
for searching for patterns,
searching for pattern. Correct.
The climate's. Rob says, what is he notes that the US is slow and the European Union is faster at implementing things like guardrails. Will AI be exploited for a long time before we have any guardrails?
Well, as we know, an executive order came out a week ago or something like that in US. Europe is also considering it. You usually are more deliberative, and they will come up. The GDPR, the General Data Privacy regulations in Europe exist, and many companies in US, even though there is no GDPR in law in US, many companies in US, because they are global companies and they do business in Europe as well, they observe that voluntarily. So it is not true that all corporations always trying to run away from. No, many of them, they want to make money while acting ethically, and that is possible. So whichever company if we are in, we use our voices, that will be part of our discourse.
Jim has an interesting comment. He says, I'm a medical provider currently writing a medical manual and I have found ChatGPT to be very useful in generating signs and symptoms, medical history questions, first-line medical treatments, step-by-step process for procedures, starting an IV, etc. In other words, I ask questions that I've already been trained to know the answers, and I use the ChatGPT to confirm what I know on the topic or to prompt questions I may have forgotten to include in the medical history. I find that I must double check everything to confirm accuracy. However, despite this, it is an excellent tool.
I second that comment. He is a good example of a very good use of AI in the hands of somebody who both knows the facts and therefore is not fooled, and also then uses the tool in an appropriate way. So all power to you, and I hope many more people can use that. There is no doubt in my mind that in X number of years to come, nearly everybody will use AI in one way or another to help their profession.
We have two questions here about how AI can be used to help with the activities of the Baha'i community, and whether it can be used to ultimately to unify the world.
Maybe that's a bit too much to ask AI to unify when we are disunited. You know, asking the robots to try to put us in our correct place. That's probably a bit too much. I think I will say this: let us not be dazzled with technology. We use technology in the service of community building, but let us not imagine that technology has the solution. Humans have the solution. Technology helps us implement it with less pain.
Well, that's well said, and we're now at the bottom of the hour, so perhaps that's our good last comment. And it appears most of the remaining questions are, thank you very much, and thanks as usual for a brilliant talk, and these kinds of comments. So I certainly want to echo our question and answer audience exactly that way. You have given us a lot to think about today, and a whole new perspective on this whole problem of artificial intelligence and what to make of it, and for that matter, how to use it and how not to use it. I was really unaware of a lot of this, and I'm very grateful to you, Farzin, for all this information. So turning back to my audience, I want to say thank you, everyone, for joining the Wilmette Institute's webinar today. We hope that you will share some of these ideas and this information that you've heard with your friends in conversations with others. Please also tell others about the Wilmette Institute's regular webcasts. We look forward to seeing you again at a future webcast. Goodbye and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.